So thank you for joining us this morning and this afternoon and this evening. How did you all first meet?
Oh, how we met is different personally from professionally. I think I met Peter.
It was in a cheap guest house in Blackpool.
Same old story. And I think I met Paul through Peter. Paul was slightly suspicious of me at the time because I'd supplied some episodes that were screened at Wolf Time, wasn't that right? The glass. Too much? Okay. I supplied some episodes, and because I was in the BBC and Paul was in the BBC, Paul was somewhat suspicious to where these episodes in such good quality had come from. But we got talking afterwards, or after, and we've been firm friends ever since. And I think, Mark, I can't remember when I first met you.
No, I can't remember when I first met you. It seems like I've known you all my life.
Yeah.
In fact, all three.
What a life, eh?
And what a life it's been. And then when did you meet me?
I met you not to kill in '88.
Quite likely. 87. So that was.
I asked if you might be interested in doing some music.
I didn't do it. They were making a film. They first band about it now.
On a professional basis, I was one of the three people that founded, I suppose, what became the restoration team with Greg Montague and James Russell back in '92 when we got together to restore the Demons to colour for the first time. And off the back of that, I think Paul was instrumental in talking to BBC Worldwide about us taking on responsibility for doing the VHS releases. Because we were fans. We were buying the VHS releases and we were constantly being frustrated by the quality of what we were buying, and when we knew that there was much better in the archives if we could just get to it. So we basically said, we think we can do this for you better and cheaper, give us a go. And I think then Mark came on board to do a lot of the sound, and Peter came on board because he had just got into the very early sort of PC video editing and video restoration stuff. You spent an awful lot of money, really, didn't you, I suppose?
Well, it's the usual early adopter thing, yes. Yeah, it's not a lot of money in that scheme of things.
But basically,
the first computer that did fire on, I think it was Planet of Giants, something like that, it had a massive 6.5 gigabytes of drive space, and that had to be spread across 3 hugely expensive SCSI drives.
and it took a week to process an episode, I think, didn't it? Yeah.
I'd obviously been working on. I'd been a fan, like you lot, for very many years, and then I got into television as a sound engineer and aspiring composer, and I'd done my music degree and got into television as sound engineer and was starting to do writing work, composing work, and then I got made redundant from my. Well, I didn't get made redundant. I got sacked from my job. I was working as a sound engineer at TVAM. And there was a massive bust-up there between the union and the management, and all the technicians, 200 of us, got sacked. So I basically wrote to every producer I had ever met. By that time, there was quite a few of them. One of them was John Nathan Turner. Bless him, he was the only one who wrote back and said, "Come and see me." So I went to see John, and I worked on Doctor Who for the next 2 years, which saved my life and my mortgage, basically. So it was, I owe John an awful lot. So that was where I got into doing full television scores, was through that. But I became aware, both as a fan and as someone who was interested in this business, that a lot of the work of people who were doing it, who had done the same job as I was doing, writing incidental music, a lot of that was missing. So I got into really as a hobby tracking down copies of tapes of music, and I realised obviously at the same time that there were people, including people like Ian at the back, and people in this room who were trying to track down missing episodes. So we all sort of met through that sort of love as people who were working, us for working in the industry.
I think we all shared an absolute fascination for the fact that there was a lot of missing Doctor Who.
A lot missing.
Yeah.
So I started doing the soundtracks, albums basically, initially licensing stuff off BBC and putting it out through Silver Screen. But like you, frustrated with the copy of what we were getting on VHS, I was seeing what was coming out as audiobooks for Doctor Who, and again being very disappointed with the quality, because although I knew what the source was, which was off-air recordings, I knew that they could be done better. So in exactly the same way as you were chasing to do better work on the video releases, I was chasing to do better work on the audio releases. And it all sort of took a while to come together, but the reason I got the job doing the audiobooks was that Steve Cole had taken over as manager of, basically at that time, they had one person at BBC Worldwide who was responsible for everything Doctor Who, everything. And that was Steve Cole. You knew Doctor Who, you knew Steve through
I think I probably only met Steve for the first time, I'm not sure. We were a bit wary of him, weren't we?
Yeah.
He came on to a session where we were doing the War Machines, and we knew he was all right. When he sat at the back of the room, we could hear him humming along to the incidental music from Death to the Daleks.
but you'd introduced me beforehand because I did the audiobook, which was the one that Steve wrote the narration for, in quotes, because Sue ended up doing it. And that was the first one we did, which was Massacre? The first audiobook.
This is decades ago, I don't remember this shit.
But I'm sure you put me in touch with him and said, I'll talk to Mark because he's, I don't know if we met properly, but that was an interesting story because we wanted to do this first audiobook and there was not a lot of money to do it, we didn't know whether it would work, and we really wanted Peter Purvis to narrate it. And we contacted Peter and he said, I'd love to do it, but the bad news is I've just fallen off my roof because I was cleaning my gutters and the ladder gave way and I can't get out to a studio. So I said, don't worry, can we come to you? And Peter said, can you do that? And I said, well, we will do it. So basically at that point I put together a portable recording studio which fitted in sort of 4 cases in the back of my car. And I went up to Peter's to do the narration at his house for that first audiobook, which was great, and it got Peter back into work, and it meant that we established a way of doing this stuff, that we could do this stuff on a budget, we could do this stuff to very high quality on a budget. And I used to go to Peter's house, or to Fraser's house, or to Annika's house and record the narration. Sorry. and record at the homes because it was fun. We used to go out for dinner. There was no pressure on the clock because you weren't marrying your studio by the hour. Very funny story though. I went down to stay with. We want to get back to the. Went to stay at down near Annika's. I was staying at a hotel just down the road from her. We were recording her house. We went out for dinner in the hotel. Got the hotel, standing at the bar, having a drink. I went off to the loo. When I came back, Annika was talking to a group of lads in the bar, and she said, "Mark, come over." She said, "These I want to meet you." I said, "They're big fans of yours. They're big fans of yours." What's she done? She's going to have a bum fag cigarette, which she always did, to have a cigarette. And they said to her, "Mark, here's your week." She said, "Yes." Why? He said, "Oh, he's just a friend of mine. We're doing some work." So I came out the loo, she introduced me to them, and they say, "Why are you here?" I said, "Well, I'm down here working." "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm working with Annika." And they went, "Blah!" They hadn't realised it was so. Then I said, "Anyway, carry on."
Well, what I want to ask is, obviously we all know about the work that you have done on missing episodes that have been returned, and there's a lot of secrecy that's involved with that. Has it been difficult keeping it secret, and is it necessary to keep your work secret?
Yes and no. Yes, it's very necessary. It's very necessary we keep it secret. No, it's not difficult. Just don't talk to anybody. Don't even tell the wife what you're doing.
Is it necessary to keep it secret? I think the problem is if you're undergoing, if we're undertaking a restoration of something, it can't be done under public scrutiny. It has to be done. So you can just focus on it and not worry about all the chatter. And it can be quite difficult if it's quite difficult with Web and Enemy when it was undergoing restoration. And lots of people were talking about it on the internet because there were leaks from other people. So that can, I think it is difficult. Does it need to be secret? I think it depends. With Airlock and the Underwater Menace, it didn't need to be secret, but we made it that way because we wanted things to be a surprise at the BFI. But it's interesting that I was thinking about this the other day. So with Airlock, Terry Burnett contacted Rafe Montague and returned the film. And Rafe said, what should we do about it? And I said, well, I think we should show it at Missing Billy Quiet, and therefore that means we need to keep it quiet until December. To which everyone thought, well, how are we going to do that? And I said, well, let's just not tell anybody. Which we didn't. And if we had announced it then, actually, I'm not sure, because there would have been a lot of publicity about it, I'm not sure that Terry would have been that keen to hand over his second episode. And I think the fact that we did keep it quiet because we wanted to make, get a bit of publicity for the BFI, helped get that other episode out. Because even before we'd screened it, he'd got Airlock back in his hands, and a week later, he then said, "Oh, I found another one." I mean, he has said that it was completely a fluke that he found it on his shelf, but I'm sure he knew that he had 2 episodes. I'm sure.
I'll tell you one thing that springs to mind about a good thing from a security point of view. Years and years ago, when I was working on Resistance is Useless, we discovered that the film of the Daleks burning the forest of Kemmel from Master Plan episode 2 was missing. I called up what was supposed to be that, and it actually turned out to be something that we didn't even know existed from episode 1, so that was fortuitous. But we didn't know where the episode 2 was. It turns out it actually had been sold to a friend of ours who bought it completely unknowing that it had been stolen, and he was very happy to return it, to give it back to the archives. So it was the first Missing Believed White at the BFI, and I was given the film in the foyer, and as Adam Lee, who was the archives secretary at the time, was walking on stage to give his first presentation and open the ceremony, I handed him this roll of film and said, "Here's your first missing return, let's kick this off properly." And Adam then was really pleased about this, obviously, and then agreed that he would send it back to me from Windmill Road to Television Centre, so that the next week we could do a proper transfer of it to the archive. I went down to get that film on the morning, and the guy in film traffic said, "Somebody already tried to take this film, but we knew you were coming for it, so we wouldn't let them have it." So I don't know who it was that tried to take it, but somebody tried to intercept that film between it coming back from Adam and getting to me. So it's good to keep these things quiet.
I've got another story as well about this. When the Faceless Ones was returned, I didn't work at the BBC at the time, but I was in and out specifically about that episode because we were screening it in Birmingham first. And I went with Gordon and Saeed on the day they returned it to Wimble Road. And I sat with the film examiner as he first examined the film because it was quite damaged. And then I kept in contact with Steve Bryant, who was the archives director at the time. And he told me that for security purposes, they were going to keep that film, the copy they were going to make was going to be a mute print. And they were going to lift the sound off and have it as the master sound would be on a magnetic, 16mm magnetic. So normally, like the film I've got here, it's an optical print. It's one read of film with picture and sound on it, and therefore it's easy to make a copy of that. And he was trying to prevent piracy. So if you've got the picture and the sound separately, it's much more difficult to put it on a projector and make a copy of it. But in between, so they'd made the negative and a new print, which was mute, and then they sent the film to Ealing for it to be to have the sound taken off. And the film disappeared. The original Faceless Ones print disappeared. Someone just took it and had it for about 3 or 4 days. And then it miraculously appeared back on the shelf 3 or 4 days later. And in that period, someone had obviously taken it and made their own print, we think. So, they knew it had come back.
Well, what I would say about the need for secrecy is a lot of the time, in fact all the time, for us it comes down to professionalism that's expected of us by the people that are kind of to employ us and give us work, which pays our bills. If you're working on something and people are happy for you to talk about it in advance of it coming out, well, that's absolutely fine. But if you're told that it's secret, and yes, for Web and Enemy we signed NDAs. In actual fact, I only got the NDA to sign right. I think it was the back end of September when the bulk of the work had actually been done, and it made no difference really because I always treat everything as though it's under NDA unless I'm explicitly told otherwise, because it just ultimately it could damage my income, and I'd like to carry on working and be able to feed people.
Thank you. When you're actually handling, and I know you've got some examples of various pieces of film there, when you're handling these returned episodes which have been missing for countless years, is there a sort of fear factor that if something goes wrong, if I damage this, there's not another copy? How do you cope with that sort of pressure?
I don't think we've really felt that pressure because we're professional people who know how to handle the materials that we're working with generally. I think in terms of film's pretty easy to handle and fairly robust. I think 2-inch videotape, if an original 405 by 2-inch videotape came back, that would be a different thing really, because we'd know that it would probably be in very bad condition and just playing it would probably degrade it even further. So we'd have to be very careful. I mean, we'd probably end up having to even bake the tape before we even tried to play it, which is a way of restoring videotape where the plasticizers are starting to leach out and the tape becomes sticky. You bake it in an oven and the nasty bits evaporate and it becomes basically dry again and it can be played. Unfortunately, yeah, you have to bake it at about 3 very, very, very carefully, at about 3 degrees below what's called the Curie point, which is where the magnetic domains on the film spontaneously just revert to random. So
it's gas mark 2.
You've got to be very, very careful.
So are we going to have like a restoration team bake-off?
Do the audio tape as well. I've got a thing I used to bake audio tape because audio tape and exactly the same thing. It goes sticky after many years. In fact, it was just a couple of formulations they introduced in the mid-80s, are the main ones. That I mean, it did have separate steps as well, but the main formulation was, and it was for very good reason. A lot of early tapes. The way audio and video tape is made, it's a plastic backing, which is a thin strip of plastic, that's the tape. And then there's a layer of in effect, glue, and on top of that you have a layer of iron filings, in effect, which is what you actually record on. The binders they used in the early days of magnetic recording tape were made from various oils, including whale oil. And of course,
that was the good stuff, the whale oil.
The whale oil, unfortunately, was the good stuff. I mean, environmentally, no, absolutely awful. But it was stable. It was an organic compound which was inherently stable. And when they decided it wasn't environmentally friendly in the mid-80s, they went to a synthetic variant, which hadn't been tested. And unfortunately, over 10, 20 years, it has broken down. And I've got whole reels of tape. You put them on a recorder, a tape machine, you start playing them back. Within about 10 seconds, the thing starts squealing, literally squealing, because the tape is sticky and it's sticking to the guideposts. And so the first thing you do is stop. You very carefully rewind it and then you bake it. And you bake it, and 1/4-inch tape, you bake it for about 4 hours, turning it every half an hour, literally. And what happens is that the liquid that has made it go, so the water that's got in, that has got into the binder, because it's by osmosis, because it's trapped water, gets pushed out, evaporates, and you've then got a week. You've got a week to then transfer that tape, because it will immediately start taking on again. And that happens a lot. So the first thing you do when you get any kind of, sort of, I feel, audio tape, you look at it very carefully. And is it going to stick? If it's going to stick, you bake it. Is it from the pre-80s, in which case it's probably not going to stick, but may it have actually gone the other way, may it have dried out. I put a tape on the other day, and remember the first 2 seconds, it literally just snapped. So stop, how do we deal with that? So you absolutely let it stabilise, you're very, very careful. And this is another reason why I have a BBC A80 quarter-inch machine, because it has the most incredible transport. If you put it on a domestic machine, which doesn't have the correct tensions, which maybe has a very tight tape path, the A80 is beautiful, it comes down, it goes around the roller, straight up and then straight back on. A domestic one will go around with really sharp corners, which really put tension on the tape. So, you know, you have to have the right machines, you have to treat them carefully, and it's why I'm terrified, certainly with some of these archive tapes. So something like the original Doctor Who theme, the tape still exists, but the way Delia Derbyshire worked, the way this electronic music was done, was every note is a separate piece of tape, and they're all stuck together with bits of sticky tape. So the Doctor Who theme, da-dum, da-dum, that's 4 bits of tape stuck together with bits of sticky tape. Okay? 50 years old, over 50 years old. They've all dried out. So if you're not very careful, you put that machine on a tape, or that tape on a machine, you press play, and the room will be full of confetti within minutes, seconds. So all these things take an awful lot of TLC, and you know, maybe, I mean, I think the Doctor Who Master took me, it's, you know, one reel of tape, it probably took me 2 days to transfer when we digitised it a few years ago. We should treat this stuff so carefully.
Yeah, just a little note about whale fat and tapes. I mean, I've played quite a few, some of the original 2-inch tapes, and Doctor Who, and the best one was the City of Death, which was on Agfa tape, which is a whale fat tape, and they just played that amazingly. It was perfect. And then you compare that to something like Death of the Dark Park, usually on this dodgy old Scotch tape, not scored particularly well, and that was just awful. I mean, the problem with a lot of these old films, particularly the ones that have come from abroad that have not been scored well, like The Web of Fear and News of the World, is that they can just fall apart. And the situation Peter's reminded me with End of the World Part 4. The tape, I mean, I've got some of the cans here. That's Web of Fear. That's Web of Fear. And this End of the World Part 6. End of the World Part 6. Episode 4 had the first few feet transposed in the film. So if you got the sprockets are on the wrong side. So if you laced that film up and put it on a projector or a steam deck, you would have got about 5 or 6 feet in, and then suddenly where the sprockets were would become the soundtrack, and then you just shred the film. So it's why we always put the film onto a rewinder first, rewind bench first, and check it manually. With Web and Enemy, I cleaned them by hand, the edges of the film. I ran the film strip by hand with just a polishing cloth to get the grit. There was a lot of grit that settled on the surface of the film. So there's no film in here. Film's at the BBC. But so the film obviously would be there, and what had happened is at some point the lids had been left off, and a layer of fine grit had settled on the surface. And of course, if you put the film on a projector, all of that grit will fly off and settle on the surface of the film, rather than, so it would come off the edge of the film where it's not doing any harm, and end up on the surface of the film. So as you wind the film off the rewinder, you have to get rid of all the grit. Otherwise, it will settle and scratch the film. So that was the first job of Web and Enemy, and then the rest of it was kind of gluing it all back together and putting new leads on.
It reminds me of some, even in the best hands, damage can occur as well. So when we came to the nominators for DVD, in episode 1, we got the negs transferred from, borrowed from the BFI. But before the BFI would loan out back to the BBC the negatives, they got one of their film examiners to check the film. Mysteriously, when we actually got the transfer, during episode 1, there was a massive scratch that went for about 5 seconds, followed by a dirty grey splice. So clearly, and when you look back to the previous time that negative would have been out, which was when a print was made, possibly for the VHS release or whenever, it wasn't there. It certainly wasn't there when the BFI provided the BBC their copy originally. So even in the BFI film examiner's hands, basically they created something that took me about 2 days to fix.
Yeah, we did have one recent, quite unfortunate incident really, which is when we were remastering Spearhead for the Blu-ray. Episode 3 was absolutely covered in crap, basically. Just dots of stuff, not blemishes, but stuff that was stuck onto the surface of the film. And we went back and we looked at the transfer that we'd done previously for the previous DVD release, and that was okay, although it started getting a little bit speckly towards the end. And it turned out that, very unfortunately, when we'd sent the films out, the negs had gone out to laboratory to be printed up into a new interpos, which is what we were going to then transfer. There'd been a reaction between the fluid in the tank, in the printer, and a coating that had been applied way back in the 70s just to that particular episode. For some reason, we peeled the can was covered in labels. We peeled the labels back, and right at the bottom was a label that said this film was being treated with Permaguard, which was some kind of lacquer type thing, and the lacquer had reacted badly. So that original negative at the moment is still awaiting a suitable way to be treated if we can ever manage to get the crap off it again. But it just shows that even the most professional people, labs who are used to dealing with stuff all the time, can still make mistakes when you don't know the actual history of a particular film. If we knew that film had been treated with Permaguard, we would never have gone near it.
Thank you.